Heritage Foundation Vice President, Foreign and Defense Policy Studies, James Carafano, is following the very latest for us from Washington. Mr. Carafano, thanks for taking the time with us. All indications so far seem to indicate that Rahami was acting as a lone wolf. How then do we get ahead of attacks like this? How do we improve our investigative system?
So first of all, I hate the term lone wolf because it makes it sound, like he's Ted Kaczynski in the Unabomber and he's hiding in the woods and not talking to anybody, has no contact with anyone, and nobody has any indicators. We very rarely see cases like that. Now, sometimes we miss signs that somebody's planning on malicious activity that we should have caught, but that's very different from saying this person operated alone and you can't catch these people. So what's very important to look at is this fits well within the trend of what we have seen since 9/11. There have been at least 89 known terrorist plots since 9/11. We keep track of this, the Heritage Foundation. We have a database. The trend that we're seeing in recent years is fits right in with what we saw both in Minnesota and New York, which is increasingly what we're seeing is acts, even though they may be ISIS-inspired or even ISIS-related in some way, but they're organized, they're planned here in relatively small, disparate groups, and people are attacking in their backyards. And these cases, if they are officially labeled as acts of terrorism that can be prosecuted in a court of law, they will fit well within what we've seen before.
So, Mr. Carafano,
what we're seeing now, right?
89 plots against the U.S. counted by the Heritage Foundation. You would include this one, I suppose. That's now 90.
It would be 90 or 91 if
90,
they both.
90 or 91 if it's two separate incidents. You don't like the term lone wolf, and yet we have a suspect who appears to have been acting alone. What do you call these people? And then, more importantly, how does law enforcement stop them?
Right. So, of the 89 plots that we've had since 9/11, the overwhelming number of them have actually been thwarted, and some of them were very, very small plots that didn't, you'd have to go looking for them, which is exactly what law enforcement did. And we stopped them by going out and doing their job in terms of gathering information, intelligence, law enforcement sharing, good counterterrorism operations. I mean, those by and large largely work. And even in the cases where somebody has gone to fruition and had a success, I think even in some of those cases, if everybody had been doing their job correctly, I think of things like the Fort Hood bombing and the San Bernardino, those would have likely been stopped. So the true cases where you could say, boy, this is somebody that just got below the radar screen and we shouldn't have caught him, those are very, very few. I might put the Boston bombing in that category where those guys were literally, I think, legitimately, you might argue law enforcement did not have enough to go after them. But this case we'll see. And I think the other thing that's very profound in this case and people should really recognize is this is typical. I mean, the seconds after a bombing, everybody wants to know, is it terrorism or not, and this and that and everything else. And what we've seen is law enforcement pretty quickly is going to get a lot of information intelligence, and they're going to have a lot of answers quickly. And so it's really not helpful for us to sit around and do a bunch of speculating, because you can connect any dots you want if you get to pick the dots you want to connect.
What I don't hear you saying in terms of what could have been done to prevent this type of attack is close the borders or tighten border security. This suspect came as a baby, and yet we have a major party candidate for president making that kind of commentary in response. So from your perspective as an expert in this area, do you think border security is key to law enforcement stopping lone wolf or solitary actor, self-radicalized individuals?
Well, so one thing I think is wrong is I think it's really wrong to kind of take these things and try to develop a political agenda one way or another. The way you know what the meaning of this is when you know why and what happened, and then say, could we have done anything to prevent that? That's how you determine that.
But would the border security have helped? I mean, do you think that is a key component?
Very specifically in this situation, again, I wouldn't put anything on or off the table until we actually know the facts of this case before we start drawing conclusions like that. We've had 89 plots since 9/11. If you're asking me what is the most efficacious thing you can do to stop Islamist-related terror plots, then I would tell you that good law enforcement and appropriate counterterrorism operations are the most effective tool. finding bad guys and stopping them before they hurt anybody is the most effective tool. Now, having said that, there's a whole range of ancillary activities that you can do which are efficacious for improving Homeland Security, and politicians can debate those forever.
You did mention the stabbing at the mall in Minnesota. For our viewers, 9 people were hurt there, and ISIS did claim responsibility for that attack. What do you think, as investigators continue to look at the bombings that happened here in New York and New Jersey, do you feel as though all indications will show that this was if not linked to ISIS, inspired by it?
So ISIS claims credit for lots of things. Sometimes they anger Al-Qaeda because they claim credit for stuff Al-Qaeda did, and Al-Qaeda gets really mad. So just because ISIS claims something isn't necessarily a deal closer. The way you do this is they're going to go in and they're going to find lots of ways to gather information because they have a known perpetrator. So they're going to interview people, known associates. They're going to interview his family. They will go through the residence with a tooth comb. If they have any electronic devices or a computer or a cell phone, they'll go through as many of those records as they possibly can. And they will pull together a composite picture which begins to suggest what the motives are. And until we have those, we really can't say. But here's what I will say, because it's just a fact, of up until this, of the 89 Islamist plots that we have documented, the trends have been very, very clear in recent years. There are more plots. People are attacking in their own backyard, and virtually all these plots are either in one way or another ISIS related or ISIS inspired.
I want to bend back to the presidential election for one final question. These 89 plots, Donald Trump has said that an increased profiling activity, profiling of potential suspects ahead of their action would be helpful. I'm curious, do you think that would be helpful, or is what would be the term here, is the community where this type of suspect emerges need to be cultivated in a different way? Is profiling the right approach, or is a different kind of outreach the right approach?
Right. So profiling's a very vague term that means lots of different things to lots of people. What is appropriate and useful is gaining situational awareness in communities. Now, if you look at our 89 plots, there's not a typical plot. It's not like everybody's radicalized in a mosque, or everybody's radicalized in a prison, or they're all coming from this kind of community. Not. They're very disparate and all over the place. But there are indicators in communities of the kinds of activities that you would want to look after. And if law enforcement is doing their job appropriately, they will come onto these. So, for example, mosque shopping is a good indicator, right? If you see somebody that's going to 6 or 7 mosques and he's continually kicked out of the mosque because they think this guy's just too wacky for them, and then and so they kick him out of the mosque, and that happens 6 or 7 times because the guy's mosque shopping, looking for people who share his ideology and people he can connect with. That's an indicator. Those are the kind of things that, if the law enforcement community had, without violating anybody's civil liberties or civil rights, they could actually open up an inquiry and do the kinds of appropriate things that allow people to catch those kind of people. So community policing, which is understanding what's going on in a community, whether it's a community made up of 90% Muslims or one guy there from Afghanistan, or intelligence-led policing, which is looking for indicators which suggest that some people are more like or are something worthy of a higher level of investigatory power than others. Those are good, sound practices. So if that's what somebody means, then that's proven that works, because most of these plots have been stopped that way.
How do you think Rahami was able to buy all of these supplies under the radar?
So a lot of these are very, very common things that are very easy to get. I think if we did I know if we did this, if we went to the FBI kind of bomb, and if we went to the ATF, bomb plot database, this would look like virtually every bomb plot that we've ever had. These are the most two common types of bombs to assemble, because they're very low level of technology. Lots of information out there on the internet and other places on how to do it. A lot of these supplies are very, very easy to get. So if you're an amateur bomb maker and you're a do-it-yourself terrorist, this is exactly what I would expect to see.
So how do we prevent it, though? If this is exactly what authorities are expecting to see, then how do we prevent this from happening again?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's why people mostly get this wrong, because they're like, who's the person I should look for, or should I look for a car bomb or a dirty bomb, or are they going to blow up shopping mall or the Super Bowl, and that's kind of the wrong way to do it. Everybody focuses on the 1% of a terrorist attack that looks different, and what you need to focus on is the 99% of a terrorist plot that always looks the same. People organize, they plan, they talk to other people, they gather these supplies, and you add those indicators up, and that's how you find it. And people say, well, that's impossible. And the answer is, dude, no, it's not impossible, because we have a long track record of doing that successfully in the United States.
But you're not going to be able to control the purchase of pressure cookers, but
right.
this chemical that the residue was found on one of the bombs, tannerite.
Right.
Does that need to be on the market? Is that a valuable contribution to the overall society?
Yeah, so I'm not going to talk about any specific one item, but here's what I would tell you. I mean, just in general, if your notion is we're going to child-proof our way out of this problem, then you're going to lose, right? So, and I'm not saying that some chemical ought to be banned or whatever, but you hear this every time is let's ban something, right? So at the end of the day, I take a rock and I drop it off an overpass and I kill a school bus full of children.
You don't ban rocks.
Are you going to ban rocks and overpasses and school buses? So the answer is, I mean, there might be some legitimate things where you can have a conversation about due diligence, not just for terrorists, because they operate in such small numbers, that's kind of nutty. But just in public safety in general, have those conversations, have them apart for terrorism. Talk about that. Do we want everybody to have a nuclear weapon? Well, maybe not. Okay, fine, I get that. But when you're talking about stopping terrorist acts, the way to do that is to go out and find bad people and stop them before they hurt anybody with legitimate law enforcement intelligence sharing tools.
All right, James Carafano of the Heritage Foundation. You make it sound all so simple. We appreciate your perspective.